Hi there! Thank you so much for watching. We're about to start, but real quick, if you haven't already, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this story. I still remember that night like it's burned permanently into my memory, refusing to fade no matter how much time passes. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, drumming against the window of my hotel room in an endless rhythm that should have been soothing, but instead felt ominous. I was half asleep, drifting in that strange space between consciousness and dreams, when I heard a knock at my door. Sharp, urgent, wrong for 3 a.m. I hesitated in the darkness, my heart already racing before I'd even moved, before I had any real reason to be afraid. But something primitive inside me knew. I opened the door just a few inches, keeping the chain lock engaged. The night manager stood there in the dimly lit hallway, his face pale and visibly nervous in a way that immediately set off alarm bells. He spoke quietly, almost whispering. "Ma'am, who's staying in room 208 with you?" I blinked, confusion cutting through my sleepiness. "No one. I'm here completely alone." His face changed instantly, and his voice dropped even lower. "Then who just came to the front desk, asking for an extra key to your room?" That single sentence froze everything. I felt every sound in the world go suddenly silent. The rain, the hum of the air conditioner, even my own breathing seemed to stop. I didn't know it then, standing there in my pajamas with this stranger delivering impossible news. But that moment was the beginning of one of the most terrifying nights of my life. 2 days earlier, I had checked into the Ashwood Inn, a quiet little hotel tucked deep in the mountains of North Carolina. I'm Hannah Cole, 28 years old, and I work as a travel photographer. I just finished an exhausting assignment that took me from coast to coast, capturing forgotten towns and quiet faces, documenting America's overlooked corners. My last relationship had ended badly, messily, with restraining orders and changed phone numbers, and I desperately wanted peace. Somewhere no one knew me, somewhere I could finally breathe again. The lobby smelled like old wood and fresh coffee when I walked in. The man at the front desk, Mr. Lewis, was friendly in that practiced way hotel staff perfect over years of greeting strangers. He had tired eyes that told me he'd seen too many long nights. "You're in room 208, he said with a polite smile, sliding the key card across the counter. "It's one of our coziest rooms." When I reached my room on the second floor, it was simple but genuinely warm. A queen bed with a thick comforter, soft yellow lighting that made everything feel safe, and the constant sound of rain outside that I'd always found comforting. I unpacked methodically, made myself tea in the small electric kettle provided, and called my mom like I always did when traveling alone. She worries constantly about me whenever I'm on the road. "Promise me you'll lock that door, honey," she said, her voice carrying that familiar mixture of love and anxiety. "You never know who's out there anymore." I laughed, told her I'd be perfectly fine, and promised to call her again in the morning. It felt like such an easy promise to make. Before sleeping, I glanced at the key card in my hand. It said 208A in small print, though the door itself only displayed 208. I thought it was just a minor printing mistake, some quirk of the hotel's keycard system. Nothing about the room felt strange then, not the quiet hallway, not the faint smell of fresh paint I noticed. But looking back now with the clarity of hindsight and trauma, I wish I'd paid attention to the small things. The second door painted the exact same color as the wall, perfectly camouflaged. The one that led to the adjoining room, I didn't know existed. I spent the evening editing photos on my laptop, losing myself in the familiar work of adjusting light and shadow, cropping compositions, selecting the images that told the best stories. Around midnight, the storm outside grew significantly louder. Wind pressed hard against the window, making the glass shudder. The power flickered once, plunging everything into darkness for a heart-stopping second before settling. I locked the door carefully, checked it twice with my hand on the handle, and fell asleep to the sound of thunder rolling through the mountains like distant drums. If anyone had told me that just a few hours later someone would be standing at the front desk asking for a copy of my room key using my ex-fiancé's name, I wouldn't have believed them for a second. But that's exactly what happened. The rain hadn't stopped since I checked in. It drummed endlessly against the window, like it was trying to remind me that I was miles away from anyone I knew, truly alone in these mountains. When I finally drifted back to sleep after that call with my mom, it felt like sinking into a heavy fog that wouldn't quite let me rest properly. But something woke me a little after midnight, pulling me back to consciousness with a jolt. It was faint at first, like the shuffle of footsteps outside my door in the carpeted hallway. At first I thought it was just another guest coming back late from dinner or the bar. But then I heard it again, and this time the sound was slow, deliberate, stopping right in front of my room. Not passing by, stopping. I held my breath and waited in the darkness. The handle of my door rattled softly, as if someone was trying to turn it without making noise, testing it gently. My pulse jumped violently. I sat up in bed, staring at the door through the darkness, every muscle tensed. Then came the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against metal, the kind you hear when a key slides into a lock. For several frozen seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't decide what to do. Then survival instinct kicked in. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and shouted toward the door, "Who's there?" The sound stopped immediately. Complete silence. Nothing moved. I pressed my ear against the solid wood, but all I could hear was the storm outside and my own blood rushing in my ears. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and called the front desk with shaking fingers. "Front desk, this is Mr. Lewis," came his calm, professional voice. "Someone's outside my room," I whispered urgently. "They just tried to open my door. They had a key." He sounded genuinely startled. "No one should be up there at this hour, ma'am. Let me check the hallway cameras immediately." He asked me to stay inside and keep the door locked while he investigated. I could hear the faint clicking of his keyboard through the phone as he pulled up the security feeds. "Strange," he said after a long moment. "There's no one visible in that corridor right now. The hallway's completely empty." "But I heard them," I insisted, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. "I know what I heard." "Stay calm, please," he replied in that professionally soothing tone. "I'll come check personally." I stayed pressed against the door, listening intently. A few minutes later, I heard heavier footsteps, faster and more confident, then a soft knock. "It's Mr. Lewis," came his voice from the other side. I opened the door just an inch, keeping the chain engaged. He stood there, his hair slightly damp from walking through the storm, looking genuinely puzzled. "No one's in the hallway," he said, glancing both directions. "But the security cameras flickered right before you called. Probably just a power surge from the storm, affecting the system." He left after assuring me everything was fine, that I was safe, that it was probably just my imagination combined with the unsettling sounds an old building makes during storms. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. I double-locked the door and pushed a chair under the handle before lying back down. I told myself firmly that I was imagining things, letting stress and exhaustion play tricks on my mind. I tried desperately to believe that. Then, at exactly 3 a.m, came another knock. This one was louder, more insistent. I jumped out of bed, genuinely terrified now. When I looked through the peephole, it was him again, Mr. Lewis, the manager. But something in his face looked completely different now. His eyes were wide, and he kept glancing nervously down the hallway, as if he wasn't entirely sure it was safe to be standing there. I opened the door just a crack, and that's when he asked me the question that sent ice water through my veins. "Ma'am," he said quietly, urgently, "who's staying in room 208 with you?" I frowned, certain I'd misheard. "No one. I told you I'm here completely alone." His face went deathly pale. He took a step closer and lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. "Then who just came to the front desk asking for an extra key to your room?" My stomach dropped violently. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" "About 5 minutes ago," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder, like he expected someone to appear. "A man came to the desk. He said his wife locked him out of room 208. He gave me your name, your full name. I handed him a duplicate key before I realized something felt off about the whole interaction." I felt my entire body go cold, my skin prickling with fear. "Did you see his face clearly?" Mr. Lewis nodded slowly. He wore a dark hoodie pulled low. I couldn't see much detail, but he said his name was Ryan Carter. The name hit me like a physical punch to the chest, knocking the air from my lungs. "That's my ex-fiancé," I said, my voice trembling uncontrollably now. "The one I have a restraining order against." The color drained completely from the manager's face. "Ma'am, we need to call the police right now, immediately." He reached for the radio clipped to his belt, but before he could speak into it, there was a noise from somewhere down the hall, the distinct sound of a door slamming. We both looked sharply in that direction. The hallway lights flickered once, casting strange shadows. Then everything went quiet again, except for the endless rain. I locked the door as soon as he left to call the authorities from the front desk. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely manage the simple motion of turning the deadbolt. I tried calling my mom, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried the police next, and the dispatcher's calm, practiced voice did absolutely nothing to steady my racing heart. She said an officer was already being dispatched and would arrive within 15 to 20 minutes. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping my phone like a lifeline, listening desperately for any sound. That's when I noticed something I definitely hadn't seen before. A faint line along the far wall behind the curtain, barely visible, but definitely there. I pulled the curtain back slowly and found another door. It wasn't visible when I'd checked in because it had been painted the exact same color as the surrounding wall, camouflaged perfectly. A small metal plate above the handle read 208B. For a long moment, I just stared at it, frozen in disbelief. Then came a soft tapping from the other side, just 3 gentle knocks. I stepped back instinctively, my throat tightening with fear. Another tap, then a whisper so low I almost thought I'd imagined it. Hannah. My name. He'd whispered my name from the other side of that hidden door. I backed away until my legs hit the bed frame. My heart was pounding so violently it actually hurt, drowning out even the thunder. The phone in my hand slipped from my grip and clattered to the floor. I stared at that door, waiting for it to move, for the handle to turn, for him to come through. But it didn't. The whisper never came again. That was the moment I realized something that made my blood run cold. Whoever had asked for that duplicate key wasn't gone. He hadn't left the building. He was still here, somewhere impossibly close. Maybe in the very next room, maybe watching through cracks in the walls. And I knew with absolute certainty that this night wasn't over. It was just beginning. I couldn't stop shaking. Every muscle in my body was tensed, ready to run or fight, though I had no idea which would be more useful. I stared at that hidden door marked 208B, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. The room felt smaller now, claustrophobic, suffocating. I picked up my phone from where I dropped it, but the screen was blank, no signal. The storm must have knocked out the cell tower. I switched on the bedside lamp, and its yellow light flickered uncertainly over the peeling wallpaper and rain-streaked window. I tried desperately to steady my breathing, telling myself it was impossible, that I hadn't really heard my name whispered from behind that door. But deep down, I knew I had. The knock earlier, the duplicate key, the whisper, it all connected in the most horrifying way possible. And that name, Ryan Carter, the man who had promised to love me forever, then systematically shattered my life when I discovered how dangerously obsessive he'd become. After our breakup, I'd blocked him everywhere I could think of, changed my phone number twice, deleted every social media account, but somehow he always found ways to contact me anyway. Once, months after I'd left him, flowers arrived at a hotel where I was staying for a photography assignment. The card had said only one thing in his distinctive handwriting: "You can't hide from love." Now, standing here in room 208, with that memory fresh in my mind, my stomach twisted with sick recognition. I pulled the heavy dresser across the floor until it blocked the adjoining door completely, wedging it as tight as I could. Then I unplugged a floor lamp and wrapped my hand around its metal base like a weapon. The sound of rain outside grew even louder, mixed with occasional thunderclaps that made the lights tremble. I went to the main door and checked the locks again, pressing down on the deadbolt as hard as I physically could. My reflection in the mirror above the desk looked pale and wild, my hair messy, my eyes showing too much white. Then the room phone rang. I nearly screamed. The old beige landline sat on the nightstand, something from another era that most hotels had long since removed. It rang twice before I forced myself to answer. "Hello?" my voice cracked. "Hannah, it's Mr. Lewis," came the manager's voice, breathless and urgent. "Lock your door. Don't come out for any reason. We just checked the security feed again more carefully. The man who asked for the extra key never left the building." My chest tightened painfully. "What do you mean he never left?" "He walked toward the east hallway after I gave him the key, and then he disappeared completely from the cameras. We think he's still inside somewhere, possibly using one of the old maintenance exits or passages. Stay in your room until the police arrive. They should be here any minute now." "Wait," I said quickly, glancing at the dresser blocking the hidden door. "There's an adjoining door here marked 208B. Did you know about this?" A long pause. Then his voice came back sharper, more worried. "That's impossible. There is no 208B in this hotel. There never has been." "I'm looking right at it," I insisted, staring at the door. "Stay away from it," he ordered firmly. "Don't open that door under any circumstances." The call cut off with a click. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the dead tone, then slowly lowered it. I felt utterly trapped, caught between fear and disbelief and the horrible certainty that something was very, very wrong. If there was no official 208B, then what was behind that door? A minute later, the tapping started again, soft, rhythmic, patient. Someone knocking gently from the other side, waiting for me to answer. I gripped the lamp base tighter, my knuckles white. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying desperately to sound brave. No reply. Just the wind pressing against the window. I backed toward the front door, but something made me stop. A quiet sound like fabric brushing against wood. It was coming from inside the wall itself. I crouched near the dresser and pressed my ear against the wallpaper. Faint but unmistakable, I heard breathing. Steady, controlled breathing coming through the wall. Someone was definitely there. I ran back to the room phone and tried calling Mr. Lewis again, but the line was completely dead now. My only choice was to wait for the police or find another way out. But waiting felt infinitely worse than any danger. I grabbed my camera tripod, heavy and solid metal, and pushed the dresser aside just enough to see the crack of the adjoining door. My hand trembled violently as I reached for the handle. When I turned it slowly, the door creaked open just an inch. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and something else. Something stale and wrong. I pushed it wider and stepped cautiously into the dark adjoining room. The light from my lamp spilled across an unmade bed with tangled sheets. The window was wide open, curtains fluttering wildly in the wind. Rain had blown across the carpet, and muddy footprints trailed from the window to the door. I followed them with my heart hammering in my chest, each step feeling like walking toward inevitable disaster. They led to the nightstand. On it lay a single photograph, a printed picture of me taken just days ago. I was standing outside a cafe in Georgia, my camera around my neck, smiling at something off camera. It wasn't a photo I'd posted anywhere online. Whoever took it had been close, watching me carefully, following me. My throat went completely dry. I turned toward the closet door and noticed it was slightly ajar. I could see the edge of a dark sleeve hanging inside. I took a step closer, raising the lamp base like a weapon, my entire body tensed. Then came the faint sound of a floorboard creaking behind me. I spun around. The adjoining door slammed shut violently. The light in my hand flickered once, then went out completely. The room plunged into absolute darkness. I ran to the door, banging on it desperately. "Mr. Lewis, somebody help me!" My voice cracked with panic. I could hear footsteps moving outside in the hallway, fast and heavy, then gone. For what felt like an eternity, I stood there in the dark, shaking uncontrollably. Then my phone buzzed with an incoming text message. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped it as I lifted the screen. The message had no name, just a number I didn't recognize. It read, "You shouldn't have opened that door." My heart stopped beating for a second. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. The screen lit the floor, illuminating the photo again on the nightstand. A single drop of water fell onto it from somewhere above. Not rain from outside, but condensation from inside. The realization hit me like a wave of ice water. He had been here, in this room, just moments before I walked in. He'd been watching me through that open door. And now he could be absolutely anywhere. I grabbed my phone and the flashlight I always kept in my bag, ran to the main door, and yanked it open with all my strength. The hallway stretched empty before me. Only the echo of rain and distant thunder followed me as I ran. That was when I truly understood this wasn't just a mistake or a terrifying coincidence. Someone had been planning this carefully, watching me for days or weeks, waiting patiently for the exact moment I'd be alone and vulnerable in this isolated mountain hotel. And tonight, they'd finally found me. I ran down the hallway barefoot, my heart hammering so loud it felt like it echoed through the entire floor. The emergency lights cast everything in a pale red glow, giving the empty corridor a nightmarish quality. I didn't stop running until I reached the front desk, breathless and drenched in sweat despite the cold. Mr. Lewis looked up from the computer, genuinely startled. "Miss Cole, what happened? Are you hurt?" "He's here," I gasped, barely able to form words. "The man who asked for the key. He's inside the hotel right now." His face went very still. Without another word, he locked the front door with a heavy click, pulled out his personal phone, and called the police again. "They should have been here by now," he muttered, pacing nervously behind the desk. The storm outside continued its assault on the building, wind pushing rain in sharp sheets against the glass. The lights flickered once more, making both of us freeze, then stabilized. When I tried desperately to explain what I'd seen in room 208B, he frowned deeply. "There isn't a 208B, he said again, more firmly this time. "We've never had adjoining rooms on that floor. The building layout doesn't allow for it." "I was just inside it," I nearly shouted, desperation making my voice crack. "There was an open window, muddy footprints everywhere, and a photograph of me on the nightstand. I'm not making this up." He stared at me, clearly torn between disbelief and growing fear. "Show me," he finally said. We took the stairs back up together, each step feeling like walking towards something terrible. The hallway was eerily quiet except for the creak of old wood beneath our feet. When we reached room 208, I hesitated for a long moment before sliding my key card in. The light turned green. I pushed the door open slowly. The room looked completely normal, too normal. The bed was perfectly made, the lamp glowing softly, everything in its proper place. "The dresser," I said quickly, pointing. "There's a door behind it. That's how he got in." Mr. Lewis helped me shove the heavy dresser aside. My heart sank into my stomach. The wall was smooth and unbroken. No hinges, no handle, no door. Just faded wallpaper and a barely visible seam where something might have been long ago. "I swear it was here," I said, trembling. "I'm not crazy. I saw it." Mr. Lewis looked around the room carefully, then pulled out his phone. "Let's check the security." Lewis's own voice played faintly through the feed. "Need help, sir?" The man said something inaudible, then signed a name in the guest log. "Zoom in," I said urgently. He did. The name was written clearly in the book. Ryan Carter. My throat tightened painfully. "That's him," I whispered. "That's really him." The footage showed the man taking a key card from Mr. Lewis, turning toward the hallway and walking out of frame. Mr. Lewis scrolled forward carefully. The man never came back through the lobby. "See," he said quietly, "he never left through the main exit." "Then where did he go?" I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. He looked at the monitor, brows furrowed in concentration. "Wait, look at this." He pulled up the digital check-in records on another screen. There were 2 entries under room 208. One for me, checked in 2 days ago. One for Ryan Carter, same date, just a few hours after mine. "That's impossible," Mr. Lewis said, his voice shaking slightly. "We don't double book rooms. Ever. The system won't even allow it." Before I could respond, one of the security camera feeds flickered strangely. Camera 4, showing the west hallway near my room. The footage was from just minutes ago. A shadow moved past my door, tall and deliberate. Then it stopped. The door handle turned once, testing it, then twice. "He's still here," I said, my voice breaking. "He's been here the whole time." Mr. Lewis grabbed his radio. "Security to the 2nd floor immediately," he said, but before the words fully left his mouth, every light in the office went out. Every monitor went black simultaneously. The room was swallowed in complete darkness. I felt him grab my arm. "Stay right behind me," he said firmly. We used our phone flashlights to make our way back toward the stairs. The hotel had gone completely silent, except for the storm pounding relentlessly outside. As we climbed to the second floor, I noticed something on the carpet that made my blood run cold. Wet footprints, fresh and clear, leading directly toward room 208. They were recent enough that water still glistened in the overhead emergency lights. We reached my door. It was standing open. The lamp inside flickered weakly, casting strange, dancing shadows across the walls. My suitcase had been overturned, clothes scattered everywhere, like someone had been searching frantically through them. On the bed sat another photograph, the same one of me from Georgia, but now it had something written on the back in thick black ink. Found you. Mr. Lewis radioed again, his voice breaking slightly with fear. Suspect is still on site, room 208. Need backup now. A faint sound came from inside the bathroom, a slow creak like someone shifting their weight, trying to stay quiet. He gestured urgently for me to stay completely still, then pushed the bathroom door open with his flashlight, leading the way. It revealed an empty bathroom. The shower curtain moved slightly in an unfelt breeze, but there was no one visible behind it. And then I saw something that made my skin crawl. The mirror above the sink looked slightly crooked, tilted at an odd angle. I stepped closer, something pulling me toward it despite every instinct screaming to run. "Wait," Mr. Lewis said, but I didn't stop. I pressed gently on the edge of the mirror, and it shifted with a small mechanical click. Behind it was a dark, narrow crawl space leading into the walls themselves. The smell hit first, damp, stale air mixed with something metallic. I shone my flashlight inside, and my breath caught in my throat. Old insulation hung loose like cobwebs. Scattered on the plywood floor were scraps of paper, an empty water bottle, a discarded fast food wrapper, and most horrifyingly, my missing photo albums. The ones I thought I'd lost after the breakup, that I'd assumed I'd accidentally left behind in one of my many moves. My fingers trembled as I picked one up. Every single photo was of me. Some from years ago when Ryan and I were still together. Others from trips I'd taken recently, after I'd left him, after the restraining order. Someone had been collecting them, documenting every moment of my life. Mr. Lewis's voice was barely above a whisper. He was living in the walls. He must have been here for weeks. I turned to look at him, fear flooding every inch of my body. "You mean he's been inside this hotel, hiding in these passages this whole time?" He nodded slowly, his face pale. "We thought those old crawl spaces were sealed years ago. They were supposed to be sealed." Before I could say another word, a loud bang echoed from somewhere down the hall, sharp and violent. We both froze. The sound of police sirens grew suddenly louder outside, blue and red lights flashing through the rain-streaked windows. Mr. Lewis ran to open the lobby door for them. I stayed back, staring at the open crawl space, half expecting to see a shadow move inside it, half expecting hands to reach out and grab me. But there was nothing, just silence and darkness, and the smell of someone who'd been living like an animal in the walls. When the police finally arrived, they searched every floor methodically, every hidden passage and maintenance shaft. They found nothing. No one was there anymore. The crawl space led to an old maintenance shaft that exited behind the hotel into the woods. It was standing open, and wet footprints led out into the storm before vanishing into the mud and darkness. Standing there with the police, wrapped in a blanket someone had given me, still shaking uncontrollably, I realized the horrifying truth. Ryan had been watching me for days, maybe even weeks, studying my routines, learning my patterns, waiting patiently for the perfect moment. He'd known exactly where I was going to be, and even now, somewhere out there in those dark mountains, he might still be watching. That night, room 208 was officially sealed off with police tape. I never went back inside. I couldn't. The next morning arrived with weak sunlight struggling through the rain clouds, pale and cold, like it didn't quite belong to the same world that had terrorized me just hours before. Police cars still lined the parking lot of the Ashwood Inn. Officers moved quietly between rooms, marking areas with yellow tape, taking photographs, collecting evidence. The once peaceful mountain hotel now looked exactly like what it had become, a crime scene. I sat in the lobby wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket someone had draped over my shoulders, hands trembling around a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. My reflection in the glass door looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, broken open from the inside in a way that might never fully heal. Detective Hayes, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, sat across from me in one of the lobby chairs. She'd been kind in her way, but there was no real comfort in her calm, professional voice. "We've reviewed all the footage again," she said, leaning forward slightly. The man entered through a maintenance door connected to an old service tunnel beneath the east wing. It hasn't been used in years. The lock was broken, probably by him weeks ago. We believe he was hiding in those passages before you even checked in. I felt my stomach twist with nausea. So he was already inside the walls when I arrived? Just waiting? Hayes nodded slowly. He must have been watching you from inside the crawl spaces. When the storm knocked out power to certain sections, including some of the security cameras, he made his move. We're still actively searching the surrounding area, but so far there's no sign of him. He knows these mountains, knows how to disappear. I stared at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. None of it made sense in the way normal life was supposed to make sense. The duplicate key, the fake booking, the photographs of me that he'd somehow taken without my knowledge. Every piece pointed to someone who knew me too well, who'd studied me like a subject, who knew exactly how to make fear feel deeply personal and inescapable. "How did he even find me here?" I whispered. "I was so careful. I didn't tell anyone where I was going." The detective hesitated, then pulled a small evidence bag from her coat pocket. Inside was a phone, water damaged, but still recognizable. "We found this hidden in the crawl space," she said quietly. "It's registered to Ryan Carter. The last number searched was yours. There are also dozens of location tracking apps installed." I couldn't speak. My voice had completely abandoned me. I didn't need to see the contact name to know it was his phone, that he'd used it to track my every movement. The realization settled over me like a physical weight. He hadn't just stumbled across me by coincidence. He'd followed me systematically, tracked every move I'd made since the day I left him, maybe even before. Later that morning, I was escorted back to my room under police supervision to collect my belongings. I hesitated at the door of 208, feeling my chest tighten at just the sight of it. The yellow police tape stretched across the handle like a scar that would never fade. Inside, the room looked smaller than before, emptier, stripped of any illusion of safety it might once have offered. The walls felt too thin, the air too still. Every corner held the memory of footsteps, whispers, and shadows. I gathered my camera equipment, laptop, and a few essential clothes, moving quickly because I was terrified to linger even one extra second. Then I saw something under the bed that must have fallen during the chaos of that terrible night. A folded piece of paper that looked yellowed and old. I reached for it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It was another photograph, a picture of me standing in front of the hotel entrance the very day I checked in, completely unaware I was being watched. Written on the back in Ryan's unmistakable handwriting were the words, "I was closer than you think." I dropped it instantly, my throat closing up. The officer beside me picked it up carefully with a gloved hand. "We'll take this as evidence," he said softly, kindly. But no evidence could erase what I'd felt. That someone had stood in the rain outside, watching me walk in, photographing me, knowing exactly which room I'd be sleeping in that night, knowing everything. The police offered to relocate me to another hotel immediately, but I refused. I couldn't stay in another room, not anywhere near this place, not after what had happened here. I drove away before full dawn broke over the mountains, my car's headlights slicing through the lingering rain and morning fog. I didn't play music, didn't stop for coffee or gas, even though I needed both. The world outside looked blurred and unreal, but the fear was sharp and solid and more real than anything else. Every time I passed a parked car on the side of the road, I glanced at the driver's seat, half expecting to see those same familiar eyes watching me. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep properly in the dark. I'd wake at the slightest sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of floorboards settling, the wind brushing against my window. Every ordinary sound became a potential threat. My mother insisted I come stay with her, and for the first time in years, I agreed without any argument or pride getting in the way. She never said, "I told you so," never made me feel stupid for traveling alone. She just held me while I cried through nights that felt like they would never end, like the darkness would be permanent. Therapy helped, but slowly, incrementally. I learned intellectually that what happened wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have predicted or prevented it. But fear doesn't vanish just because the immediate danger ends. It lingers invisibly, waiting in silence for the next trigger. I started sleeping with my camera beside the bed. It sounds strange, but somehow holding it made me feel safer. Like if I could capture the darkness through a lens, document it, it couldn't hide from me again. Like I could control it somehow. Months passed before I could talk about what happened to anyone beyond my immediate family and the police. When I finally did speak publicly, I turned the story into a warning. I started sharing my experiences online through a blog and later videos, not seeking sympathy, but genuinely trying to help others, especially women who travel alone for work like I do. I wanted people to understand that danger doesn't always look like a monster in the dark. Sometimes it looks like someone you once trusted completely. Someone who smiles in your photographs and learns your routines until you stop noticing they're always there in the background. One night, while organizing my photography files, I went through my camera's memory card, deleting old photos to make space for new projects. That's when I found it. An image I absolutely did not take myself. It was a photograph of me standing by the window in room 208, staring out into the rain, completely unaware. The timestamp read 2:46 a.m., just minutes before that first knock on my door. My breath caught painfully in my throat. The picture had been taken from outside, through the window, from the darkness. I deleted it immediately, hands shaking. But it didn't matter. The image had already burned itself permanently into my mind. It was a reminder that even now, even after everything, safety is a fragile illusion we construct to get through each day. I've moved apartments twice since then, and I still check every lock twice before bed, sometimes 3 times. I inspect every window, every closet, every space where someone could potentially hide. People sometimes ask me why I continue to tell this story when it's clearly so painful to relive. The answer is actually simple. Because silence only helps the ones who hide in darkness. If my story can make even one person double-check their hotel room door, notice a stranger who lingers too long, or think twice before sharing their location publicly online, then reliving the trauma is worth it. I don't know where Ryan is now. The police never found him, despite an active warrant for his arrest. They believe he's still somewhere out there, possibly using a different name, possibly planning his next move. But I've stopped waiting for closure that may never come. What I've found instead is awareness, a deep understanding that life can change completely in a single knock at 3 a.m. And that survival isn't about being fearless. It's about being prepared, being aware, trusting your instincts, even when they seem irrational. So I want you to promise me something. Always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Fear isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing trying desperately to save you. And remember, the scariest monsters aren't the ones in horror movies. They're the ones who know your name, your routines, and exactly where you sleep at night.